Hello, my name is Michelle and welcome to my channel, Michelle's Melancholia. And welcome to the second October vlog. Well, actually, this is going to be part vlog and part sit-down video, but it's all going to be about The Midnight Club. So basically, last week I finished reading The Midnight Club by Christopher Pike, and I wanted to read this early in October because the Netflix adaptation just came out, and the TV show was directed by Mike Flanagan, and I've loved every other Netflix show that he has directed before. I am the number one fan of Midnight Mass. And actually, I think I mentioned in my previous vlog that I was thinking about not watching the TV show until November because I wanted to dedicate October to watch more horror movies, but I couldn't wait. After I finished reading the book, I was too excited for the TV show, so I just went ahead and watched it. So I have already talked a little bit about this book while I was reading it, but I thought for today's video I could just give you like my final thoughts and my final review. Then I have a little vlog portion of me watching the Netflix adaptation with some early thoughts about that. And then I thought after that I could just give you my full review of the TV show, spoiler free, and then enter into a little bit of comparison between the book and the TV show. And as always, I will have timestamps for all of that below in case you're only interested in one of these things. You can just go ahead and jump right to it. But let's begin with the book review. I love this book. I gave it 5 stars, but I am aware that this will not be to everyone's taste. And let me elaborate on this a little bit. I did read this when I was a teenager, maybe I was younger than a teenager. This came out in 1992, but I didn't start reading Christopher Pike until I had finished the whole Goosebumps books. So I'm going to say I was maybe 12 years old. So I did have a very vague recollection of what it was about, but very vague. I did remember that when I read it, I didn't think it was horror. I was just like, what the hell did I just read? But also reading it now, I was very much aware of the plot because I listened to a podcast episode from one of my favorite podcasts, Say Pot and Die, and they usually discuss Goosebumps books, but they sometimes do episodes discussing other kinds of related YA or children's books. And they did one episode on this one. I will link it below if you want to listen to it. It's great. The whole podcast is really good. But anyways, in that episode, they give a summary of the whole plot with a lot of commentary. So I knew very well what I was getting into. And I think that definitely played in my favor, because this book can barely be described as horror. And actually the synopsis in the back is extremely misleading. I will read it for you just in case you're not familiar. The Midnight Club, the most exclusive club around. They went to Rotherham Hospice to die. They formed the Midnight Club to try to deal with their pain and anger. They told stories of love, life, and the afterlife. Then the stories became reality. Terminal illness doesn't have to mean the end. They were victims of life, victors of death. So the first part is accurate up to the point of them telling stories, but that's about it. This makes it sound like there is going to be supernatural events surrounding their deaths or after they die, and that's absolutely not what the book is about. So yes, they are a group of teenagers living in the hospice, diagnosed with terminal illnesses, and they tell each other stories to cope with these. But that's literally it. It is about their personal beliefs and the way they individually choose to deal and to cope with what's going on with their lives and their health. There is very little plot. It is mostly about how the stories they tell to each other relate the way they are feeling. But personally, for me, just that was a very interesting experience. It was very emotional, very sad, very eye-opening, especially during this time of year. I actively seek to think about death, and it is gut-wrenching. Like, I had teary eyes at multiple points during the book. Sometimes it dwells for really long on like really heavy topics, on the emotional pain these kids are going through when confronted with their mortality. And at other points, they mention things about death or dying in like very casual conversation, in a very light-hearted way. And of course, you can see that when put in this situation, they would have to have both, because at some point they just become so familiar with death that it permeates every conversation, every aspect of their lives. In the book, the main character is Ilonka, who we find out is quite fixated with the idea of taking natural remedies, and she really thinks that this is going to heal her, so she's going through a huge phase of denial. And also she has a crush or is in love with another patient called Kevin. And one really big part of this book is that Ilonka very strongly believes in reincarnation, and she believes that her and Kevin have been together through previous lives. So this also has a huge impact on how she relates to Kevin. Then we have Anya, who is more of like a jaded or like cynical character. Then we have Spence, who enjoys telling really violent stories during the club meetings. And finally, we have Sandra, who is very religious and she doesn't engage too much with the storytelling. And as I said, none of the characters are super likable, but they each have a very strong voice. And what I really liked is that that voice comes through in their stories. The stories in the book, honestly, are not very good. They are very simplistic, like what a teenager would tell. But within the context of the book, of what it is about, I think they serve their purpose really, really well. Ilonka's stories in particular, they are very strange. She, as I said, because she believes in reincarnation, she usually tells stories that she claims are from her past lives, from when she lived in India and Egypt, I think. And those, I think, came across a little bit dated. It came across a little bit as exoticizing African and Asian cultures and their system of spiritual beliefs. So I wasn't a fan of those. So to wrap it up, I don't think this is a book that I would just recommend. I would say if after my description you're still curious about it, go for it. And also in general, if like me, you are sometimes very curious about reading about death and dying in general, then it's definitely worth a try. Just finished the first episode. I really like it. I'm hooked. I haven't cried yet, which is good. And I really love the casting, especially Anya. She's great, but honestly, Ilonka, Kevin, they're all really, I think they really embody what I imagined while I was reading the book. And there's also some extra characters, and I don't know yet what their purpose is going to be, but we will see. So after episode 2 yesterday, I didn't give my thoughts because I was really sleepy, so I just went straight to bed. But I love that episode, and this is not a spoiler because it's the name of the episode. It's called The Two Danas. So the Two Danas is actually one of the stories that one of the kids in the hospice tell in the Midnight Club. And I thought that in the TV show, the stories would be mostly based on other Christopher Pike books, but I was really happy to see that they included the Two Danas, because I think maybe it's the best story, if not one of the best stories in the book. So that was really good. Actually, I just saw that episode 3 is called The Wicked Heart, and I know The Wicked Heart is a Christopher Pike book. So I'm guessing it's going to have the story from that book, but I haven't read it, so we will see what it's like. Okay, so I've actually been binging because it's really good and I'm hooked, and I'm up to episode 6 now. But just to recap, episode 3, which was The Wicked Heart, indeed is based on one of other Pike's books, but how I think it is that that book is just told as a story within the club. So that was pretty entertaining, and kind of like the same format followed in episode 4, which is Give Me a Kiss, and episode 5, which is See You Later. So in all of those three, the story that is told during the meeting is another one of Pike's books. And it's been not super sad so far. I think only like some little bits in episode 4 and 5 I kind of like felt sad, but I didn't cry. I haven't cried yet at all. So yeah, that's good. Okay, so I forgot that there's actually two things that I want to say. One is that the other Pike books that are filmed as the stories that get told, they're really entertaining because they all get filmed in like different ways. So one was like an a noir style. And what's really fun about these little segments is that I think Flanagan captured really well what I mentioned. I think I mentioned this in an earlier vlog, where in the Midnight Club book, the sections of the book where the teenagers are telling the story, they really genuinely sound like, or they genuinely read like they are being told by teenagers. And the same is true for the TV show. I guess what I mean is that in the TV show, there is kind of like a change of tone between the overarching Midnight Club storyline and the segments where the kids tell the stories. And they really do come across as if they came from the mind of a teenager. So they're kind of like quirky, kind of like funny at some points. The language they use, the dialogues they use, they very much seem like they're being told by a teenager. So I thought that was a cool detail that really captured the essence of the books. And the scares have been really good. The first episode, of course, it had like the record break for the most jump scares in something or other. And then I feel like the scariness dipped a little bit for a couple of episodes. And again, in episode 4 and 5, I think it started to really increase again. And there were some like very, very scary scenes. Okay, I'm about to watch the last episode and I hope it makes me cry. Okay, so what were my final thoughts about the TV show? I really liked it. I really enjoyed watching it. It was fun while still maintaining an adequate degree, I would say, of emotional impact. I did think I was going to cry much more than I actually did. There were only like a couple of moments where my eyes got teary, but I definitely thought that I would be like sobbing throughout whole episodes, which didn't happen. I think for me, the biggest success was that the writers really captured the best bits of the book, like the essence of the best bits, and incorporated it into the TV show. So, to be more specific, I liked that even though the stories the kids told to each other were actually based on other Christopher Pike's books, they found a way to still make them reflect the state of mind of the character telling that story and to reflect what they're going through, their own beliefs about life and death, and their personalities as well. I also liked the fact that they added characters so that each one of the characters could have a very defined storyline. So, for example, instead of having many things happen to the same characters like it happens in the book, they distributed these amongst a larger cast of characters so that each one could have like a really strong voice and a really defined role within the group of teenagers. I thought the scariness level was good. I enjoy jump scares, so I had a lot of fun with that. I had no issue with the stories within the stories, if you know what I mean, except for one thing near the end, but that's more a case of like there was like one practical effect that it's supposed to show some kind of magic happening that I thought looked a bit silly. But for the most part, I highly enjoyed the sub-stories. Now, the main story arc, I didn't enjoy it that much. To me, it felt underdeveloped, and actually, please let me know if it's been confirmed whether there is going to be a season 2, because obviously many things were left unresolved. I think I actually would have liked it better if they wrapped up the whole thing within one season, except if there's a season 2, then there's more opportunity to incorporate other Christopher Pike books, so that would be the positive side of having a second season. Other than that, I really enjoyed Mike Flanagan's previously like neatly wrapped up stories, so when this ended I was a bit confused. One little detail about the show that I adored is how they incorporated visual elements that reflected, I think, the 3 most popular covers for the Midnight Club. So obviously in the main storyline, they had the hooded figure at the head of the table. Throughout the whole series, they had this motif of the candles melting, I guess a symbolism of like a life extinguishing. And of course, reflecting the clock cover, they had a lot of themes about time. And also there was this amazing scene where Ilonka is talking to Jaina, or I forgot her name. They are having a conversation, and on the chair there is this quilt that is like embroidered all full of clocks or something like that. So I thought that was also brilliant. If you pay a lot of attention, I'm sure you can find a lot of clock motifs throughout the whole show. And finally, to make a little comparison between the TV show and the book, in this section obviously there is going to be spoilers, so just be aware of that. The first thing that I think the TV show did better, I already touched upon, and it was that with the larger cast of characters, each character got a very defined storyline. So for example, I thought that Anya's story was already complicated enough, so I liked how some of the things she experienced in the book were kind of like passed over onto Natsuki, which was actually one of my favorite characters in the TV show. And also the romance between Kevin and Ilonka didn't have to be so intense. I think that would have felt rushed in the amount of time they were given, so it was good that that got distributed between a different couple as well. Other than that, I was super happy that the TV show decided to keep one of the stories from the book, which I already mentioned, which was the 2 Danas, because that story was fantastic in the book and it was fantastic in the show. The other thing that I preferred how they dealt with in the show is that we are told right from the beginning that Spence has AIDS, whereas in the book, that was like a big plot twist, like a big reveal. And I kind of don't think that was necessary. I prefer how they treat it in the show, where they give enough importance to the context of his illness, including he's suffering from the homophobic attitudes of a parent, without making it like scandalous or something like that. I also loved the Anya episode. This is a huge spoiler, so beware. The one where basically when she's dying, there is a section where she kind of like imagines or sees a possible future in which she got healed and she got to live her life, and how despite this chance, she's still struggling with so much. That is not in the book at all, and I thought The writing team took a huge gamble, and for me, it was a win. And finally, the other thing that I thought the TV show did better than the book was the character of Sandra. In both cases, she comes from a very religious background and she uses her faith to deal with her terminal illness. And even though I am not religious and I actually don't particularly like organized religion, I loved how the TV show created an opportunity to inspire in me kind of like empathy and understanding and acceptance of other people's beliefs and how those beliefs can actually make them a better person. There was one really intense conversation between Sandra and Spence where, yeah, that was one of the ones where I cried. So as you can see, actually, I thought the show did a lot of things really well. I don't have too many complaints. Actually, I think there's only one thing that for me was very prominent in the book that was really missing from the show, and that was Ilonka's strong belief in reincarnation. I think in the book that literally permeates her whole life and all the decisions she makes. And actually in the book she believes that her and Kevin have been together in previous lives, and that's one of the reasons why she is so obsessed with him and what leads her to say to his girlfriend Kathy the really hurtful things she says, because she's very possessive of him and she feels that they are just like fated to be together. And I just wish they had incorporated that in the TV show. And I think that's it. As I said, I very much enjoyed it. To be fair, from the previous Flanagan Netflix shows, I think I would rank this in the bottom, but not because I didn't love it, but just because I love the other ones so much. And I also think I, in general, enjoyed that the other ones were more like straightforward for older adults than YA. But would I recommend it? Yes, 100%. I think at the very least you'd have like a decent time. Please, if you have read the book or watched the TV show, let me know what you thought. Did you prefer one over the other? Let me know anything you want about the Midnight Club, and don't forget to subscribe. I will see you on my next video. But until then, goodbye.